Well, hello everyone. Welcome to Generation 180's Electrify Your Ride Week. Thank you for joining today's event and our lunch hour discussion on EVs and solar, driving on sunshine. To help us learn more about how these two technologies can work together, we have with us three fantastic EV and solar pros: Aaron Such from Solar United Neighbors, Noli Diakolis with Convert Solar, and Charles Garina with Drive Electric RVA. In a few moments, our panelists will introduce themselves, but before we get started, I wanted to tell you all about who we are. Generation 180 is a national nonprofit based out of Charlottesville, Virginia, working to inspire and equip individuals to take action on clean energy. My name is Tish Tablan. I'm Generation 180's Program Director for our Solar for All Schools campaign. And I'm excited to join you today also as an EV driver and a brand new solar owner. In fact, my utility just came to install my bidirectional meter on my house yesterday, so I just made it in time to be able to moderate this session for you today. At Generation 180, we have three major areas for our work. We're working to flip the energy script, which is helping us move from a narrative focused on climate doom and gloom to a story focused on where we need to go, a world powered by 100% clean energy. A story that says we can do this and we all have a role to play. We focus on individuals in their homes and communities because your energy matters, and because certain behaviors and technologies not only help fight climate change, but also help build the social momentum and political will we need to get big system level changes. Our two major national campaigns also focus on solar and electric vehicles. And these are clean energy solutions that address the two largest sources of carbon dioxide emissions: electricity generation and transportation. Our Solar for All Schools campaign is hosting 3 virtual events this Thursday, including one on electric school buses. And these events are part of the National Solar Tour, which Generation 180 is co-hosting with Solar United Neighbors, where our panelist Aaron Such is the regional director. So you can go to the Generation 180 website to learn more and register for those events on Thursday. And of course, today's event is part of our Electrify Your Ride campaign, which works to make EVs more accessible. And throughout the year, we host educational events like this where people can learn more about EVs. And this week, we've lined up 13 events for EV owners, EV advocates, and the EV curious alike. We've got sessions that will dive into EV conversions, workplace charging, transportation policy, expanding access to EVs, and much more. So please join us tonight at 7 p.m. for the EV Trivia Happy Hour. And I hope you check out the rest of the events this week. It's all free and open to everyone. And we're even giving away an electric bike to one lucky person who signs our Going Electric pledge, which you can find on our website. So let's get started, but a few quick housekeeping items first. Because of the number of people who have joining us today, all the attendees will stay on mute throughout the event. And you please use the Q&A, not the chat, but the question and answer to submit your questions. And we'll get to as many of your questions as we can cover in the next hour. So now let's hear from our speakers. Aaron, do you want to kick us off, please?
Yes, thank you. Finally put it off mute. Thank you, Tish. I really appreciate all the work and the partnership at Generation 180, as well as Drive Electric RVA and the work that Noli at Convert Solar does with electric vehicles. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Sun's work in the electric vehicle space, give you all an introduction to us, how we got into electric vehicles, how our work seeks to address some of the barriers, and then how electric vehicles and solar fit into a modern two-way grid. So if you're not familiar with Solar United Neighbors, we're a nonprofit organization that helps communities go solar, join together, and fight for energy rights. We work in 12 states. I am the Mid-Atlantic Region Director, so I direct Virginia, DC, Maryland, and we do have a nascent program in Puerto Rico. And our work really helps people address those barriers, and we divide it really pretty distinctly into three categories. I'm going to focus on the Go Solar work. And our work in helping people go solar is centered on what we call solar co-ops, which are bulk purchase campaigns, kind of under the broad umbrella, sometimes known as solarized programs, that help address those barriers to solar adoption. So as an organization, we just hit a milestone. We've actually just installed our 5,000th solar installation on a roof. Here in the Mid-Atlantic region, since 2010, when we started doing these co-ops, we've now reached 2,246 installations. That's a total in this region of 15 megawatts worth of installed capacity. And then through that work, we've deployed 70 electric vehicle chargers through the 12 states that we work. And we like to joke that electric vehicles came to us. We didn't come to electric vehicles. And that's because as we were helping people go solar, we found that people that have solar want electric vehicles, and people that have electric vehicles want solar. The elevator goes to the top, people begin to make that connection. And one of the reasons why I would speculate is that you could think of solar as a generator with no moving parts, a free source of fuel, and a 25-year plus virtually maintenance-free lifespan. And that solar generator is really unique because it's something you could put on your roof or on a ground-mounted system. It's kind of like your cell phone. It puts the power of energy generation in your hands. And more importantly, it produces a very important fuel. If you think of electricity as a fuel, electricity is an amazing source of fuel because of all of the things that you can do with it. You can heat, cook, cool, pump water, run machinery, and now with electric vehicles, you can produce your transportation fuel on your rooftop. So we kind of naturally found that segue. People that were going solar wanted to size their systems for electric vehicles, and folks that had electric vehicles wanted to produce their fuel on their rooftop. So our work to address those barriers came in the form of adding the option for a level 2 electric vehicle charger as part of the solar co-op model. And that was where we deployed the 70 plus EV chargers, a level 2. And a lot of our work has really focused on addressing some of those barriers. So it's based on education. Maybe Charles or Tish, you could speak to this. I think a lot of people want electric vehicles, they just don't know that they want them yet. So a lot of that is just addressing the barriers. You know, one of the things is that, you know, in our work in this stage of technology, unless you have access to home charging, I would say about 9 out of 10 times an electric vehicle isn't going to be a good fit. So we really focused on that distinct barrier, getting people to start thinking, well, you know, what's the best way to combine solar and EVs? What should I be thinking about if I'm looking to install an electric vehicle charger as far as sizing my system? Should I know a little bit about where my electric service panel, those kind of barriers right there. So it's work that really excites us. And I think it leads to the last point. And, you know, ultimately our goal is a two-way participatory energy system that directs control and benefits back to local communities. And electric vehicles really fit in that very well, because now as we start to see more vehicle to grid applications and variable rates, time of use rates, we see how electric vehicles can really help balance the grid and, more importantly, empower the user to be a participant of the energy system. And that segues really well with solar and kind of the analogy of the cell phone. You know, before it was a one-way flow. Right now with EVs and solar, it provides the opportunity for people not just to be passive consumers, but to be prosumers. And lastly, I'll just give a specific example of how our work has combined in that. Here in Virginia, we've been a stakeholder to Dominion Energy's variable rates, time of use rate stakeholder process. They're going to be rolling out a pilot program in January. So part of our work was representing some of the solar our constituents of people that we've worked with, so that they could roll out that rate in as friendly as possible manner to people that have solar EV and EVs as possible. So part of that work meant that ensuring that the rate had access to people that could use solar, electric vehicles, battery storage, and other modern grid technologies in concert. And it's something that we'll continue to build off of, and really represent that stakeholder voice as we move forward. So that's a little bit about Solar United Neighbors, and I look forward to hearing from the other panelists and answering some of the questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Aaron. Thanks for giving us a great overview of all the great work that Solar United Neighbors is doing in multiple states around the country. How about Charles? Let's kick it to you and learn more about Drive Electric RVA and what you're doing.
Great, thanks, Tish. So I guess I'm the only guy who has slides. That's okay. I'm a visual kind of guy. So wait just a moment for Nate to bring those up. And just to tell you a little bit about Drive Electric, I guess it's really telling you about my story. I'll just wait just a moment for that to come up. If you go to the next slide. A little bit of my story, you can see the picture of my house with the solar panels on it. So I actually went electric first with my vehicle in 2014. So I had my Nissan Leaf for 6 years, and then I got my solar system. It'll be 4 years this August. So it's been going to our 4th year right now, having solar. The Drive Electric RVA touches on both. And we were primarily an organization in the Metro Richmond area that advocates for and promotes electric vehicles as a fun and practical transportation alternative that also helps to reduce air pollution and combat climate change. And we've been doing that kind of education, advocacy and outreach work for a while now. And I'll talk a little bit about those things, but I just wanted to, in terms of my story, I wanted to go electric because primarily for the environmental reasons, but also to save money too. And I wanted to reduce my carbon footprint, but I also wanted to have a fuel efficient vehicle. So I actually was looking at hybrids at first, and then ended up getting an all electric car. So I actually don't burn any gasoline at all when I drive to and from work, at least when I was before the pandemic. And decided to go solar to take the next step in terms of generating my own fuel, as Aaron touched on earlier. That's been a great, that's to me every time I go to plug in my car, I know that at least when the sun is out, that that I'm using that free clean energy from my solar panels. And then if I plug it in the evening, I'm just retrieving energy out of the grid as I need it. But during the day, I'm putting energy into the grid. So there's a sort of big battery, if you will, that's kind of shared with all the people that are using the energy at the same time. Okay, if you go to the next slide. So in terms of, I just want to touch on briefly on our 3 things. Outreach, primarily do it by bringing electric vehicle owners to people. So different kinds of public events. We try to hit different audiences, from children to adults to, we're really going to be working on frontline communities and communities of color in the coming years, because if you look at the general demographic of electric vehicle owners, they're primarily white and male. There are females and there are other people of color who are owners, but unfortunately we need more because at the end of the day, in order to make the difference in terms of the certain environmental impacts, everyone needs to adopt and go electric. And so we're really focused on that particular aspect of our outreach in the coming year. We've done parades. I threw that picture in of a parade that we did last year before all this pandemic stuff happened. And so the idea is getting the technology in front of people that it's not just some abstraction that they hear about in the news or see in the newspaper, that it's actually something real and that people are driving and using every day. And the big difference in the 6 years we've been doing this is that if you ask somebody, have you ever seen an electric vehicle before? Before 6 years ago, they'd say, well, I've read about it, I don't know very much about it. Today, somebody has a neighbor, they have a coworker, or somebody in their church has an electric vehicle. So we've definitely, while it's still a very small slice of the market, there's definitely been growth, and we're very excited about that. Next slide. So education is the other aspect of what we do at Drive Electric, and it's not just on a regional level in the Metro Richmond area, but also in the state of Virginia as well. On the left is our EV experience exhibit, which we're in the process of developing prototype for. We recently received the grant to expand it. And by the end of this year, we expect to actually have this set of exhibits that we can bring to different public events, indoors and outdoors, to educate folks about electric vehicles using interactive kiosks and activities and signage and so forth. Picture on the right shows one of the events we do with students. We've done expos where for students interested in transportation careers, interested in technology careers in general. We've done presentations for different kinds of interest groups, where basically we just give a standard spiel about electric vehicles. And so education has definitely been something we added in the last few years, because to sort of take a deep dive for those people who require it. Next slide. Lastly, I want to touch on advocacy, because that's something relatively new for us. We do primarily through the Virginia Conservation Network. But one of the things we really came to crossroads on was we're getting people excited about the technology. We talk to people at public events. We educate folks in presentations. And the next question that comes is, well, where do I get an electric car? You know, and you know, Virginia, and there's other states too, where, you know, unless you're one of California, one of the CARB states that have zero emission vehicle program or an alternate fuel vehicle program, there's less of an incentive for the auto dealers to sell. And so we realized that there were some policy things that needed to be done as well, not to encourage dealers to have the vehicles, to encourage people to bridge that gap in the cost. And I'm sure we'll touch on that during the presentation, but definitely cost is a factor in terms of the upfront cost. Long-term, having an EV, you save on maintenance and on fuel, but there's a upfront cost that you do have to eat in terms of the additional thousands of dollars between an electric vehicle and a regular vehicle. And so looking at policy levers for that in terms of rebates and low interest loans and that sort of thing. So again, we do that primarily through the Virginia Conservation Network. Aligned to that, we've also worked with the Sierra Club and also with Virginia Sun in terms of looking for synergies between solar policy and the EV policy. And I'm sure we'll talk more about that later. And I guess that's it for me. And I look forward to talking with folks and answering people's questions.
Thanks, Charles. And Noli, you're up. Please tell us more about Convert Solar and what you're doing.
Good morning, everybody. My name's Noli. I work at Convert Solar. I run the sales and business development here. Just like everybody said, I won't kind of repeat a lot of stuff because everybody's brought up some really great points. Aaron hit so many nails on the head that thank you for just taking my total intro. I think I can stop now, buddy. But at Convert Solar, what we do is my background is with Tesla and Solar City. I worked there for 8 years, so I learned the EV game pretty in-depth over there at Tesla, and then we brought that here to Convert Solar. And so at Convert Solar, what we really strive for is education. Education not just here based in Virginia Beach, but actually all across Virginia and beyond. If people call us from Texas or Georgia, we get a lot of calls from, we try to educate them on EVs, on PV, on solar, and we just find that that's the most important thing. Now, just because as we were mentioning before this whole call started, the attachment rate of EV plus PV, and we've actually seen now around a 30+% attachment rate just here at Convert Solar with our 80 to 100 projects that we do a month. You're looking at a lot of people adding in EV chargers, even if they don't have an EV right now. They're planning ahead for the future because, like Aaron said, they're looking at that now. So again, Convert Solar, we are an installation company that tries to get as much clean energy out there as possible. And clean energy isn't just PV, it's EV as well, and a lot of other things, including batteries and whatnot. So that's my quick, short intro there.
Great, thanks so much, Noli. Okay, well, panelists, I think we can start with some questions that we've prepared for you all, and I'm excited to dig into your vast knowledge and expertise on this. And I know both of you, all of you have really touched on this already a little bit, but can you just make the case for our listeners, if I'm an EV owner, why should I go solar? Or if I'm already a solar owner, why should I add EVs? And I saw Noli unmute, so I'll let you go for it, Noli.
Yeah, I'll take that one. I think that's the question we get most often. And if my response to that, if I'm a EV owner, why should I go solar? And the easiest response to that is, well, why did you get an EV? Right? 90% of people get an EV because they want to cut their carbon emission. And they want to drive a really cool car. Besides a really cool car, well, if you're going to cut your carbon emissions, let's go ahead and actually power your car with clean energy by putting solar at your property. It's really as simple as that.
Nice. Charles, you want to jump in?
Sure. That is a very common question that I get. That's actually a good point because some people get into EVs for different reasons. They like the technology. For some, it's the cutting our dependence on foreign oil. And I have a friend who says not one more penny does he want to go to OPEC. So that's why he has his Chevy Volt. And other people like the fact that the performance of the car, the instant torque, the quiet ride, and that sort of thing. I'll just speak of my own experience. It made sense for me to get the car first because I had to replace my car. And so I wanted to take advantage of what EVs had to offer in terms of reducing carbon footprint and low maintenance and cost. And then, we actually have been talking about doing, my wife and I, about doing solar for a number of years. And for various reasons, we weren't sure we were going to still be in the same house, and we were kind of putting off the decision. But I think once we got the car, that really kind of pushed that decision forward. Because I thought, well, if we have the car, wouldn't it be great to be able to generate clean, free fuel and reduce our electric bill? Because people ask me, well, how much does you add to your electric bill? And for me, it adds maybe $30, $40 a month in terms of the amount of energy I use to charge my car. So wouldn't it be great if we can get solar to offset that and then some? And it's turned out more than to be the case where, we've had really good solar production the last few months. And I'd say even during the peak of the summer, our bill was like $30, $40, when it was well over $100 or more before we had the solar system. So I would say whatever it makes sense to an individual. If you have a solar system, I think, and you're looking to buy another car, it makes sense to really look at electric vehicles because, again, there's a compatibility there because there are manufacturers that are getting to combine the two things. Like I know at least one inverter that's used with a solar system that comes with a charger. So it's a combo package, and so for that reason, I think, but where it comes down to is personal choice, like which one. There's advantages obviously having both, but which one comes first, I think, depends on what your needs are at the time.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, I know in my case, I was in the same boat as you, Charles. We were ready to replace an old clunker car, and I was so excited to have a tailpipe-free car. And then solar came later when we had a chance to put that on our house. But yeah, the timing is critical for which one comes first. Aaron, do you have any thoughts to share? Why do these pair so nicely together?
No, I think both Noli and Charles and yourself touched on it really. I think there's a lot of different motivations, from people that don't want to send their fuel dollars outside of state. I'm going to channel my uncle who listens to a lot of AM talk radio. And every time I charge my battery, my money isn't going to Saudi Arabia. But there's also the added benefit, the fact that if you want to address climate change, transportation across the nation and here in the Commonwealth of Virginia is the biggest source of greenhouse gas emissions. So one of the most doable, effective things you could do is buy an electric vehicle, charge it with solar. So, our constituencies come at all different motivations. So it is highly personal, but there's just a lot of good reasons.
Yeah. Great. Well, for people who are thinking about going solar, getting EV, can you share what are the most common questions you get asked, or even some myths that people share with you? And Charles, do you want to share? I know you're out there talking to people about electric vehicles all the time. What are the common questions or myths you hear about EVs or solar?
I guess real quick, I'll tackle probably the biggest one, the biggest elephant in the room lately, and that's been, our EV's really clean, because and this comes will happen frequently. I'll be at an event and somebody will, and it's a legitimate question because one might initially react with being defensive, but it actually is one of the first questions I wondered about, because you think about it, there's a battery in the car, right? And so that uses resources to produce. And then you think about the power that goes into the car. That's, not all renewable energy yet. There's, coal and natural gas and other stuff in there. But addressing there's such things as the production of the vehicle and how you power the car. And the way I answer that in a very quick way, and I would encourage people to do a deep dive in this, because it's not a simple answer. And I'll give you the simplest answer that I can, but it's not a simple answer. The simple answer is that in spite of all those things, EVs are still cleaner. So you think about it, it takes resources to produce a car, any car. So, and minerals, metals, all that, you're gonna need those to build a car. And then in the case of an electric car, it takes a few extra things to build the battery. But those things have been produced for batteries for your cell phone, for your tablet. Lithium-ion batteries are everywhere. Anything that's rechargeable, is going to have a lithium-ion battery. And so the same minerals are used for all those things. So, and usually when I point it out, people didn't quite realize that. We take those certain things for granted. So with EVs, we have the opportunity to actually create a different paradigm, to create an economy that's not based on fossil fuel, but one that's based on renewable energy and the mining of minerals that are done more for sustainability and equitably. So, and EV owners and solar owners have a role in that, in terms of advocacy, because the same issues come with solar panels too, in terms of the material that's made for them, and then also what do you do with a solar panel? I mean, the good things, they last a long time, 20 years or more, and so do EVs, but then when they reach their useful life, what do you do with them? Of course, people don't really ask those questions about cars, regular cars either, and so that is also a consideration. In terms of the power, even when you consider it here in Virginia, with the grid that we have, actually a lot of our energy comes from nuclear, which people have their opinions on nuclear energy, but it is carbon free. And we have a big chunk of nuclear, natural gas, and then a chunk of coal, which has gotten smaller and smaller over time, and more renewables have come into play. And the nice thing is that the grid can get cleaner. The gas that you put in your car, there's only so much you can do to make that gas cleaner. A lot of technology has gone to cleaner burning fuels and that sort of thing, but you can only go so far with that. But you can make the grid, there's a huge potential to make the grid so much cleaner. And when the grid is cleaner, all the cars that plug into it automatically become cleaner. So that's probably the big myth that I get.
Yeah, and definitely that's the question I hear the most a lot in our work at Generation 180 is it really cleaner? And what I like about combining EVs and solar is that really takes any doubt away. I mean, I think you explained it very well, like why it is already much cleaner, but when you can combine the two, I think it's really clear you're driving on sunshine. Aaron and Noli, what other questions, myths do you hear about EVs and solar that would help, that you can share with the audience?
I could go on this really briefly. I think Charles touched on one, what about the batteries and the life cycle costs? Like, I'll just put it out there. That's a red herring argument that's put forth by a lot of the entrenched interests that have an interest in pushing back against vehicle electrification. So anytime you hear that, you always got to challenge it, because it's out there. Nobody says, what about, to Charles' point, what about the life cycle costs of a gas engine or a drilling rig or all those things? The second myth is that, all electric vehicles are Teslas. I bought my electric vehicle used. It's a Ford C-Max Energy plug-in, and I bought it for $13,000. So if you get something out of this, it's that you can find some really good used deals on electric vehicles that have come off of lease, and that there's also now more data showing that about the life cycle maintenance cost of an electric vehicle over the life of its life is about 50% less. So an electric vehicle is not just a Tesla. I will take a Tesla anytime, but you can buy some good used EVs as well at a decent price.
Yeah, that's a really good point. We hear a lot of questions about costs, and when people kind of think about Tesla in particular as being high cost, but people don't think about used EVs as a way to go EV affordably. Yeah, that's a great point. Noli, do you have some questions and myths you can share?
Yeah, I think the main question we get as a PV installer is, do I need a battery system, as in backup battery system, Tesla Powerwall, whatever it is, to have an EV? And the quick answer is no, absolutely not. You know, just like Charles had mentioned, there's some fantastic inverter companies now that are adding in EV chargers to their inverters, and we install those now all the time. And I did see a question in the Q&A that says, should I charge it during the day when the sun is out? And that's great. You can totally do that if you want direct sunlight. But at the same time, Charles mentioned before, is that he's making a lot of his energy and just pushing it back onto the grid. So if you have to charge your vehicle at nighttime, you're actually using that clean energy you made, and the utility company is giving those credits back to you. So you're actually charging it with your specific energy you made during the day, or kilowatt hours you made during the day, because the utility is crediting that back to you. Now, to go back to the battery question, say, for example, you get a Tesla Powerwall. A Tesla Powerwall is 13.5 kilowatt hours. Your EV battery is going to be way larger than that. So in all reality, you're going to need a couple Powerwalls to go ahead and charge your EV. So it's a better idea to not get a backup battery to specifically charge your EV, because it actually technically can't really happen too well.
Okay, great. Yeah, Noli, that kind of rolls into the next question I had for you is, you know, for people thinking about combining these technologies, solar, electric vehicle, and then battery storage, you touched on a little bit, what are the advantages of installing your EV charger and solar at the same time? You know, or any kind of advice or tips you have for people that are considering doing it all together?
Yeah, I actually did it at my house. I don't even have an EV. My parents do. So I installed an EV charger and solar at the same time, just because I know, one, it's going to be better for sellability of the house as well, and two, for my parents. And I do plan on getting an EV soon, once the old Prius, you know, hits the dust. But it's very, very simple to do it at the same time. You don't necessarily need to call up another master electrician or anything like that later on down the line. Our electricians do it. And again, SolarEdge has a fantastic inverter now that has its own energy hub that actually will charge the car just straight from the inverter to, from solar to the inverter to the car. And we install those, again, all the time now. So it's really, really simple to do. And it's really cost effective, actually, because if you go and you buy a car charger off Amazon or from Tesla or whatever it is, you're going to probably spend a couple $1,000. Whereas if you're adding that in to your solar installation with, say, a SolarEdge EV charger, or even I actually installed a NEMA 1450 plug, which is just essentially a dryer plug. And that's what you're using, a 50 amp circuit to charge your car. And if you're going to do that, that's the simplest and easiest way to do it. And you're looking at maybe max $500 total to go ahead and do all that. So you're saving $1,500 to $2,000 right there on an EV charger. And again, you're looking at probably an adder of maybe $750, depending on your installer, to install the SolarEdge Plus EV charger. And then that goes back to the person that asked the question about, do I charge it during the daytime or to use sun hours? And if you want to, yes, that SolarEdge charger actually has it built in where it will take the sun directly from the roof and put it directly into the car. It'll bypass putting it through the house first. So that's a pretty cool feature if you want to use that as well.
Nice. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to do it together. I know we just built a house, and one of the options that the builder gave us was to go ahead and pre-wire our house for EV, and it definitely was cheaper to do it while the house was getting ready, and we had some options to make it more solar ready. So it's really exciting to be able to start thinking about that, and there are builders who are now thinking about how to make your house EV and solar ready. And I know, Aaron, can you talk to us a bit more about how to size your solar installation for EVs, and just kind of some of the work you've been doing with your co-ops combining solar and EVs?
Yeah, sure. I don't know if Nate might be able to display the size that, there we go. I hope everybody can see that. But, it's actually simpler than you think. So we've designed this sizing solar for an electric vehicle page to give a real basic reference point. And really, if you figure out how many miles you drive annually, which you still have to do for insurance purposes or if you lease, then you can just look at how much capacity in terms of kilowatts that you would need. And right now, a kilowatt is basically 3 or 4 solar panels. So you can take a look at what you're driving. And then when you're talking to your installer, you would look to add whatever kilowatt capacity based on how much you drive. Now, this is meant to be pretty evergreen across the 12 states that we work in. It's a conservative number, but the truth being is that 3 or maybe 4 solar panels max can drive 3,500 miles. And most people drive, a little bit under 10 to 12,000 miles every year. And that's if you're just using or getting all of your electricity from your solar panels. If you're looking at potentially adding more solar later, this is also a pretty handy guide. So it's meant to just be a very a quick and dirty way to see how much solar capacity you need. It's on our chart, or it's on our website. So we're happy to share. And just a caveat that these numbers could vary. It's probably going to be different if you are, say, in Ohio compared to Florida. But again, a pretty easy rule of thumb. And then we tell you, lastly, on the chart, how to calculate it yourself.
Nice. Yeah, that's super helpful. And Aaron, any other thoughts you have to share about kind of the co-op work? Can you describe kind of the experience you're having with adding EV charger as an option when you do a solar co-op with Solar United Neighbors?
Yeah, it's a good question. So one thing is that we're just, doing a little bit more education. And one of the things that we like to add is think from a consumer perspective in terms of solar or electric vehicles. What should I be thinking about before you go solar or before you put in an electric vehicle charger and buy a vehicle? And that would be, are you thinking of installing your EV charger inside? Do you have the proper electrical access? So one of the things about working in solar is you'll never drive by on the freeway and look at a rooftop the same way again. You're always looking if it's a good fit for solar panels. Well, it's the same thing with electric vehicles. Do you have electric service, whether it's a 120 or inside your garage? Do you have access to that electric infrastructure? You should also think about cord length. Cord length is really, really important. It affects the price of a charger because all that DC copper cable. And I will tell you from experience, there is no worse experience than being at a party or somewhere where you have about a foot left before it can reach your electric vehicle to charge. So there's just a lot of things, but again, solar and electric vehicles are a bit of a big ticket item. And our work always encourages people to be smart consumers. Look at the resources, talk to a lot of people. People like Charles and your work, Tish, is excellent because you provide so many different tools for consumers to eventually make the decision that makes the most sense to them.
Thanks, Aaron. Charles, what are some of the most common barriers you're seeing for people to get EVs and solar? Can you talk a bit about that?
I actually will build on what was said about the location of I'm very fortunate that my electrical panel, and if you recall, the picture with my car was in the driveway, and actually the inverters and the charger are also in the driveway, mounted to a wall. And so really on the other side of the wall is my panel. So it didn't take very much work to run conduit from there to the panel. They just basically walk through the wall. Everyone's circumstance is a little bit different. So, and of course that's assuming you have a home. If you live in an apartment, both solar and EVs become a lot more complicated. Then you have to think about, in terms of EV charging, is there a common space that you can have the charger put in? With the solar, convincing the building owner to put in solar or doing community solar or something else. And so I think those are the challenges of sort of like, I think there's the assumption that of the homeowner that has the driveway. If you have a garage, and that introduces something, because then you have this thing, well, where's the panel in relation to the garage and that sort of thing, because one of the biggest costs in installing charging certainly is a charging station is laying down the conduit and the wire and getting the power to where you want your charging to be. I saw in the chat somebody mentioned that about kind of getting caught in that kind of situation. So it's important to sort of map that out if you're considering EV, solar, or both. You know, like where you get your electricity from, and then where would you want the charging to take place. So I think that's definitely, but in terms of but it's actually not terribly complicated, the process itself. I mean, any licensed electrician can install a charging station. And I just got, I got a recommendation from someone, but it was just a standard commercial install, and I had them install basically an outdoor outlet, and they plugged the charger into that and mounted a charger on the wall. And in case of the solar, and I actually got my solar through a Virginia Sun and through a co-op, and the solar installer that they hired, they were done in a few days. I mean, it was very straightforward. What actually took longer was actually getting the thing connected to the grid, waiting for their approval. But the process itself was pretty fast. So it's not terribly complicated. So I would say definitely, in terms of the location of where you want things to be, and obviously the upfront cost is the other big barrier, both for solar and for EVs. And the irony is, I mean, again, you get long-term, you get savings from both. In case of EVs, from maintenance and the fuel, and in case of solar, you're not having to pay the electric company. You're generating your own energy, and you get that back through net metering. You get a credit back on that. And so, but there's that big upfront cost, and trying to tackle that through policy, that's only a part of it. Obviously, trying to lower the cost of it for consumers, and certainly solar and EVs are a lot cheaper than they used to be. So I think that barrier. So over time, the cost will come down, but I think there's ways we can accelerate that. And I think we feel a sort of urgency to do that, given the benefits of both, against climate change.
Yeah, Noli, I heard upfront cost is a barrier. If you live in apartments or without access to charging. I'm sure you deal with this directly. What are the barriers you're seeing, and how are you helping people address those?
Yes, apartments are tough. We've been contacted to install chargers at condo buildings, apartments, hotels. So we will do that, but that is definitely, I actually think, the largest barrier if you live in an apartment or something like that, a condo, or a townhome with some weird HOA rules. But actually, to disagree with Charles, I don't believe that the upfront cost is actually there, because now there are so many different finance options for anybody from low income to purchasing it outright. It doesn't matter. So you can finance things for 10, 15, 20, 25 years, and then pay it off whenever. You can utilize that tax credit to pay that down. But I would say, when you're doing that, do your research, like Aaron has hinted on a few times. And all solar panels, all companies use the same solar panels, essentially. We're all using the same inverters. Do your research and find a company that's going to give you a fair price. That's extremely important. That's actually what Sun, or Aaron's company, does for you. But if you do not want to wait for a co-op or something like that to come to your area, which, say, if you're in California or Indiana or something, that may not be happening, do your research. And most of the time it does happen with a more knowledgeable local company. Whereas if you go with a large national company, they're going to charge you an insane amount of money for the exact same equipment. But there's so many different ways to now fund your solar up front first, and then you can go tackle the EV after that. Like Aaron said, he doesn't have a Model X. You don't need a Model X. There's so many different ways to find a nice electric vehicle. My neighbor actually just bought a Nissan Leaf. I think she bought it for like $5,000. It was used, and it still has like a 90-mile range. So if you don't drive a lot, that's fantastic. And it's a really, really low cost for electric vehicle, and to start right there, baby steps, right? But there's so many different ways to do it now that are cheap and easy.
Nice. And then Aaron, I'll let you wrap up our moderated questions, and we'll switch to Q&A, but I'll let you talk about barriers you're seeing, and maybe you can tackle, like, are there policies we need to do? What are some kind of big picture ways to address some of these barriers?
Yeah, I think probably the biggest one is just, you know, you live in a multifamily building and you have on-street parking where you just simply can't access a charger. You can't plug in. I think there was some comments in the chat about HOAs. Some HOAs have really restricted covenants. Here in Virginia, this last session in January, they passed a law that allows, it's a right to charge. So it does allow people the right to charge in HOAs. So yeah, it is at least at this point in the technology, just where you live. You know, so if you're in like a multifamily or an apartment, it's going to be a little bit more challenging than, you know, if you have a detached single family house. You know, if you have a garage, typically, if you have access to it, you're going to be able to get that electric service. But I think things are starting to change. I mean, with the DC fast charging network that's building out, some of the Tesla longer mileage. So at this point in the technology, those are the major barriers. But I think as moving forward, there's going to be less as the technology improves.
Okay, great, thanks. So I'm going to switch to some questions that we're getting. You all have you're keeping an eye on the chat, so thank you for touching on questions as we go. I'll start with one that, you know, just kind of a solar and EV fundamental question, but can someone explain, like, how does the power actually get from the panels on your roof to your EV, or does it?
I guess I'll take that one. So the power, like I said before, if you're using that specific SolarEdge inverter with their new with their Energy Hub software built in, it can actually come directly from the sun through your inverter and directly into your car, bypassing the house. Now, normally what would happen, like say, for example, at my house, since I have a NEMA 1450 plug as a charger, the sun would create the energy on my roof, DC energy, come down through my inverter to AC energy. Then it would go into my house, okay, through my panel board, into that 50 amp breaker, and then into my car. But at the same time, if the sun is out, then yes, I would be using clean energy. I would be using energy from the sun to go ahead and do that. And again, at the same time, if it's a nighttime, then you're just using those energy credits, if you've built any up during the day, to then charge your car.
Okay, great. Aaron, do you have any other thoughts, or Charles?
What he said, no, I think that's a good example. Yeah, the energy it flows in, you know, if you're just a net metered system, it flows into whatever electric devices or loads are being used. So if you're plugging in during the day when the sun's shining, the chances are those electrons are going to your EV charger.
Okay. Sorry, I'm just looking at the chat, looking for some questions to ask. So I know we touched on this a little bit, but there's a question of, you know, what would you advise people who are looking to adopt clean energy, but they don't own their home or are in a condo? So you've touched on it a little bit, but I guess if we're already in that situation, what can we do?
So I'll jump in here because I wanted to build on, I thought Noli's answer was awesome about cost, because you know, when I talk to people and they talk about costs, I tend to put that at the end of the discussion, that, you know, there's, you know, that yes, there's an upfront cost, but you know, you can get a loan, and you can buy used. But in case of solar, there's something called a power purchase agreement, where essentially, you know, well, there's two models. So, you know, there's opportunities where you can buy, and it comes from your utility, and you really need to check on it to be sure where the clean energy is coming from. But there's utilities and others that offer the ability to, essentially, you're buying, and I'll let probably Aaron or Noli describe this better than I can, where essentially you're buying an offset to the energy that you're using. So you're not, you may not have your own solar panel, but essentially you're buying credits from somebody else who is generating clean energy. Virginia has something like the Dominion offers something of that nature. And then a power purchase agreement. So for somebody who lives on a complex where, you know, multiple people, or in a community, there's also community solar as well, but with a power purchase agreement, basically somebody, in terms of dealing with the upfront costs, you know, it's essentially, it's a contract where somebody comes, puts the panels on your on the property or on your house, and then they generate the power, and then essentially, you know, they basically they make the money back and covers the cost. So you don't basically pay an upfront cost. It takes care of that piece of it. And it depends on your state. I know in Virginia, there's been some additional clarity in regulating those kinds of agreements. So again, that's something you want to check on to see if they're available and what the parameters are in terms of what the law allows for those kinds of agreements. But definitely ask around, and you're actually a really good solar installer will be knowledgeable about that, and they can kind of put you in the right direction as well.
Yeah, those are both good points. That it is very different depending on the state, what options you have. You know, you may have power purchase agreements available or community solar available. That is very state dependent. And like I said, usually a good solar installer like Convert Solar can help point you in the right direction. And I'll hand it over to Noli if you want to weigh in on that question too, Noli.
Actually, I found a question I really would like to weigh in on, if that's okay.
Sure, go for it.
Okay. With low gas prices and increased R values in insulation, what is the argument for converting to EV and solar? You know, look, solar and EVs are not for everybody. Totally cool if you don't want to do it. But the main argument for that, even with low gas prices or even dropping electricity prices, if you want to, you know, bring Maryland into it, Maryland, their electricity prices have actually dropped. You're still paying for that electricity, no matter what. You have to pay for that electricity every single month. You're going to get a bill, and you're putting that money towards that. You're writing that check and lighting it on fire, giving it to the utility company. So if you can pay for solar, you're actually putting a energy plant on your roof or in your yard or wherever it is on your property, we'll say, and that is actually going to supply a specific amount of energy that you do not ever have to get from the utility company ever again. So you've now locked in that specific amount of electricity for your house for the next 20 to 35 years. R values are great in newer homes. If you would like to do an energy efficiency upgrade and solar at the same time, that just means that you won't have to get as much PV on your roof. But either way, again, back to the original one, no matter what, you have to pay for that electricity to the utility company. So why not pay yourself instead and get a tax credit?
Okay. Well, thank you, Noli, for jumping in with that question. So we actually have about 5 minutes left. And I think I'm going to just pose one question, you know, one kind of wrap up question to each of you. And that's, you know, how can we advance more solar and electric vehicles, and kind of what are you most excited or hope for the future of those technologies? Aaron, you want to start?
Oh, I'm still on mute, so I'll take it first, actually. Education, educate yourself, educate your family, educate your friends. Simple as that. You know, get with the times, everybody. No, I'm just kidding, but I am not kidding.
Yeah, I'll build off of that. I think, you know, what we've seen with our work in solar is that some of the most compelling ways to convince people to do something is if their neighbors or their peers have it. So the fact that you have solar on your roof or an electric vehicle, you know, now you become an ambassador. And you're able to dispel a lot of these myths, and you're able to, you know, talk to your neighbors about it. That's why we do these kind of events. I mean, I think the firsthand knowledge is really key. So, you know, really, you know, being that ambassador, giving a firsthand experience, you know, not all EVs are Tesla. You can get good, you know, used EVs, you know, solar works. This is my bill. That's really important. And then I would just add, you know, looking at addressing some of the barriers. So one of the things that our work, one of our pillars of our work is to build a constituency. So we're building a constituency of solar owners, and now that can now translate to electric vehicle owners. And the thing that's great about solar and electric vehicles is it transcends politics and polarization. We get just as many conservative folks as we do liberal folks that want to go solar or have electric vehicles. So that's really powerful. And it speaks to the potential to address some of the barriers, like with HOAs or with multifamily buildings that don't have charging structure. We, in our work, we're not always aligned with the utilities, as kind of a bit of an understatement, but we are aligned where you know, the utilities are well positioned to be collaborators to build out electric vehicle infrastructure. And if that constituency speaks to the need to it and the support, it makes it even stronger, especially as we look at laws. Most of the solar and I would say EV laws are done on the state legislative level. So that constituency building and then being an ambassador is also really powerful to address those barriers.
Thanks, Aaron. And Charles, can you wrap it up for us? What are you most excited about for the future of solar and EVs?
Sure. I'll just take 30 seconds to say that actually this relates to what I was going to say, is that it's going to take a village, and I'm excited to see that there's more and more people that are involved. You know, EV and solar, you know, you have environmentalists, you have, you know, libertarians, you have Republicans, Democrats, you know, lots of people are getting excited about the technology for various reasons, and to find that commonality is becoming the place where I think there's going to be a lot of action. And related to that is being willing to listen to each other. And somebody pressed in the chat to correct me, which I really appreciate. People correct me all the time when we go to events, and I don't mind it. Actually, that makes me smarter. That, you know, the grid is not really a big battery, you know, because at night, you know, dirty energy goes into it. But I tend to think of it that way, which is not exactly the right way. But I would encourage you to be bold. You know, I want to leave people with that thought about being bold. And in being bold, it's going to freak some people out, right? So, you know, I try not to lead off with the fact that, you know what, there's fires burning in California, you know, hurricanes are hitting, you know, climate change is happening, right? It's not, you can't deny it. It's happening. It's going to get worse unless you really take bold action in the next 20 years, really, if not that. But, you know, you don't want to lead with that. You know, that's a lot to take in. And, you know, and it's going to involve making, you know, some of those changes aren't, you know, there's certain, we've been making some changes that don't push us too far out of our comfort zone, but in order to make the bold moves, we're going to have to get there. And so I think the groundwork we're laying now in terms of finding those commonalities with people and asking questions and listening to people, see where they're coming from. And everyone's not always going to agree. And then trying to have discussions because that's where we're going to start, not necessarily with the plant being on fire. I mean, you know, it is, but we need to kind of meet people where they are when we're being advocates and ambassadors. But be bold. Don't be afraid to be bold at the end of the day and be persistent.
Awesome. Thank you, Charles. Well, unfortunately, we are out of time. I love ending on the be bold message. I love that. Thank you so much to our panelists, Noli, Aaron, and Charles. Thank you to the Generation 180 team. We had some support from Nate and Blair getting this event together, and really enjoyed this conversation. There will be a recording made available at the end of Drive Electric Week. So if you didn't get to all the questions today, we will do our best to try to address them at some point in the future or in another event. So, and don't forget, we have the rest of the week of events up through the end of the week for Electrify Your Ride Week and also for National Solar Tour. So thank you, everyone.